Well, good afternoon. Welcome everyone to the Land Use Committee for the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. Happy to see us all online and welcome to those of you that I can't see. We'd like to start today with the Pledge of Allegiance, if everyone would join me. And we'll begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. And Madam Clerk, would you take a roll, please?
Yes, thank you. Before roll call, just a couple of housekeeping points. Just a reminder to please mute your devices so we don't pick up any background noise. And then also, if you'd like to make a comment, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom so that we can easily identify who's making a comment. And then for participants who are online, who are participating telephonically, you can press *9 if you'd like to make a comment. All right, good afternoon. Director Baines? Absent. Boulahan?
Here.
Clark Kretz?
Here.
Frost?
Here.
Gore?
Here.
Harris?
I'm here.
New?
Here.
West? Absent. Chair Kennedy?
Here.
Thank you. And Chair Gallardo?
Here.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Good to see everyone. We will go to our next item, and it is public communication. Do we have, this is an opportunity for anyone from the public to comment on an item that is not on the agenda. Do we have any public comments today?
We do not.
We do not. All right, then we will move on to our very first action item, and that we'll go back to you, Lynette, for the remote committee meeting action.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So your clerk to the board here, just for the benefit of our public listeners. I am before you with an item regarding remote committee meetings. As you may be aware, the governor's executive order that made changes to the Brown Act to allow for remote online meetings and waived certain posting requirements expired on September 30th. Legislation AB 361 was signed by the governor in September that makes provisions for continued flexibility for public meetings. AB 361 allows SACOG to continue to hold remote online meetings as long as there is a governor issued state of emergency, and that each legislative body, SACOG committees and the board, make a determination by resolution that state or local officials continue to impose or recommend measures to promote social distancing. SACOG plans to continue meeting remotely as long as Sacramento County recommends physical distancing, and staff will continue to review that this recommendation is in place in advance of each meeting. This item is the first item on today's agenda, as the resolution in your packet authorizes this meeting to be held remotely. Consistent with the requirements of the legislation, a resolution to continue to hold remote meetings will be brought to this committee each month. And staff is recommending approval of the resolution. I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you. Are there any questions on this item?
No.
I don't see any hands. Is there any public comment on this item?
There's no public comment.
Thank you. Hearing none, then I will look for a motion.
New moves for approval.
I'll second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. If you take a roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Director Baines? Absent. Boulahan? Director Boulahan, could you indicate your vote, please?
Hey, let's see, let me see here. Yes.
Thank you. Clark Kretz?
Yes.
Frost?
Aye.
Gore?
Aye.
Harris?
Yes.
New?
Aye.
West? Absent. Vice Chair Kennedy?
Aye.
And Chair Gallardo?
Aye.
Thank you.
The
Motion
motion
carries.
Carries. Thank you through this. And then you also have the next item for our minutes.
I do, thank you. The minutes are before you in your packet, and staff is recommending approval. These are the minutes from the previous meeting.
Thank you. Any questions or adjustments on the minutes? Seeing none, any public comment on the minutes?
No public comment.
All right, I'll look for a motion. Motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Director New. Is there a second?
Kennedy,
I'll
second.
it.
Wonderful. Moved and seconded. If you take a roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Director Baines, absent. Houlihan,
Yes.
Clark Kretz.
Abstain, I wasn't here.
Thank you. Frost,
Aye.
Gore,
Aye.
Harris,
Yes.
New,
Aye.
West absent, Vice Chair Kennedy,
Aye.
and Chair Gallardo.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to our first information item, and Casey Lizan will be talking to us about our Green Means Go roundtable.
Thank you, Chair Gallardo. Good afternoon, members of the committee. This item is an information item to keep you apprised of staff's collaborative efforts with stakeholders in the region to secure funding for the Green Means Go program, and to keep this fresh in your minds. You're thinking on this because the Lunar Committee will be the recommending committee when we do get to shape the Green Means Go program. So a quick recap of where we've come from to this point. The Green Means Go program is a program that was developed as part of the update of SACOG's Metropolitan Transportation Plan and Sustainable Communities Strategy that your board adopted in 2019. And that program aims to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from passenger vehicle travel by making investments that accelerate infill development and reduce in electrified vehicle trips. The program was created in order to help this region meet our state greenhouse gas targets that were defined and established by the California Air Resources Board. And in the defining of those targets, remember that was an ambitious target for us to try to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from passenger vehicle travel. And the most effective way to do this in our region, as identified in your sustainable community strategy, is through strategic infill development in the cities and counties of the region. So where this infill development would be focused, it would be focused within green zones that are areas that 23 of your 28 cities and counties so far have identified and adopted by resolution. These are places, they are downtowns, main streets, older commercial corridors, transit station areas where the city or county has some policies in place to support infill development already, or maybe even have, from general plan level all the way to potentially actual zoning. And those are areas that the city or county has identified as ready to receive Green Means Go investment. So SACOG has obviously been advocating to the state for funding for this program for the last few years. We were specifically trying to secure $100 million a year for 4 years. What we were successful in getting, as you know from this summer, is $38 million of that. And our advocacy also inspired a statewide program for other MPOs in the state. But for the Sacramento region, we know that $38 million is definitely serious, but it's certainly not enough to accelerate the infill development the region needs in order to solve our housing crisis, achieve our greenhouse gas targets, and recover from the economic impacts of COVID in a lot of these communities that we are looking to invest in. So as we look ahead to 2022, and now we're at the present day, we reconvened local government and private sector stakeholders in 2 roundtable meetings in the last week to accomplish 2 things. One is to update them on the great news that we do have $38 million for infill housing development. The second was to brainstorm with them what other state and local policy changes would help to accelerate infill development in green zones. Because we know that we were trying to get $100 million and we didn't get that. So we know that there is a gap. So we asked of these stakeholders for both state and local policy changes. Because what we've learned in our development of the Green Means Go concept and our advocacy. And through our Commercial Corridor Board Task Force, through the Civic Lab Commercial Corridor Series, through our Housing Policy Toolkit, through the Main Streets planning assistance that's been provided, that local policy change is the local match to state policy change. So it's going to take every stakeholder locally up to our state partners rowing in the same direction for Green Means Go to truly have the impact that, that we believe it can have. So we had a really productive set of meetings. We invited, as I said, a group of public sector stakeholders and private sector stakeholders in 2 different meetings. We had really great turnout, so great, in fact, that to get notes to you, we had to put them into, we were working on synthesizing, 90 people's worth of ideas to bring to you for today. And you have that as a handout, which you do not have to have memorized right now. That's really for you to take after this and peruse. And we will be sending these notes back out to stakeholders because we do want to get some refinement with them. What we've told those folks who came to our meetings is that we're going to use these ideas, the state policy ideas, to inform our state advocacy work in 2022. And then we will also use the local policy ideas to inform how we shape that Green Means Go grant program and how we might bring partnerships into leveraging all that investment within green zones. So with that, what I would like to do before we pause for any questions and discussions is just give a brief overview of some of the ideas, the themes of ideas that came up out of these meetings. I bring them up in part because, as I said, we will be eventually bringing a Green Means Go program proposal to you. And so we want to be keeping you apprised of the ideas that are coming through from stakeholders. So one of the topics, I'll broadly call it funding and financing. Both our public and private sector stakeholders have experience to contribute some ideas to this. There were ideas of policy changes in state funding programs, such as allowing state money to be the first into an infill area instead of the last dollar in an infill area. There were suggestions for changes to scoring criteria of funding and financing programs so that affordable housing projects in infill areas can become more competitive. And I should say these are, we have seen and heard of examples of some of these ideas before, so it's been very helpful reinforcement as well to hear this coming from the stakeholder group. We've also just started to scratch the surface in this conversation on ideas of how to use or make more usable enhanced infrastructure finance districts, which are scaled down versions of redevelopment. On another topic of fees, these are impact fees, there were a lot of ideas actually from public and private sector stakeholders for how to make these work better. We know that fees are important, they're necessary in order to actually bring development online, but how could they be better coordinated, or how could they be structured differently? And an idea that was hit on consistently across both meetings was to change impact fees from a per unit fee to a per square foot fee. So instead of charging every home the exact same fee, recognizing that a 600 square foot or an 800 square foot apartment or home may have a different impact than, say, a 2,400 square foot home. And then the last category I want to touch on is under the banner of, well, it's twofold: Sequestry Mining for the planning, and it's tied fairly closely to local policy changes for streamlining or making the local development process more certain. On the Sequestry Mining side, there were ideas for both state changes as well as state changes to actually make Sequestry Mining more meaningful. In fact, even making exemptions from doing a CEQA more meaningful, In other words, to really reduce the cost or the uncertainty of doing development in infill areas. And then there was also an idea that came out of the public sector stakeholders that many of our local agencies don't have the funding available right now to do the full-blown CEQA analysis, back up, do the planning, some of the specific planning, and then the CEQA analysis to really be able to what we would say CEQA clear those infill project sites. And so lots to dig into there, whether it truly is just a matter of getting them the funding to be able to do all of that work, or is there some specific policy change that might be needed. And then some ideas that came up quite a bit on the local policy side of the ledger, reducing or eliminating parking minimums, which this committee has heard, providing pre-approved prototypes of accessory dwelling units or other types of housing, doing fee estimates ahead of time on particular locations to really put out there, eliminate the amount of unknowns that a developer might be facing. And then some of the very obvious ones, just doing some specific planning to try to really define the vision that a community has for these infill areas. So it's a lot of information to digest. It's a lot of really great ideas. As I said, we will be sending these notes back out to our stakeholders and engaging them. And we will be bringing the same report to the Policy and Innovation Committee. And then also coming back to you at a full board meeting for a workshop on this. So with that, I will stop and see if there are any questions, and if you'd like us to dig in any more into the ideas that we got from the stakeholders.
All right. Thank you very much for the presentation. That definitely, there's going to be some significant changes. Any questions from the directors on this item? We'll start with Director Jan Clark-Kretz.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question on the money coming in. I think you said 38 million. Is that over 4 years or is that over 1?
That's an excellent question. It will be over 4 years. I'm trying to do my math right now. We're in 2021 and the money needs to be expended by 2026.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great question. Director Boulan.
Yeah, I noticed on the handout of participating agencies, Ileton is not listed. I was just wondering if it fell under Sacramento County. But I know Ileton's participated in Civic Lab and associated infill conferences. But yeah, I was just wondering about that.
Ileton was definitely invited, and if you don't see them on the list, it means that they were not able to join. But we will still be reaching out with all of this information so that we can keep your staff apprised. Yeah,
because I know with the infill, like the first infill that I've seen is that Village on the Delta project, and that's the first infill since 1973.
Yeah, which is very exciting.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, directors? I'm not seeing any other hands up that I can see. Is there any public comment, Lynette, on this item?
No public comment.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I know we got the attachments that we'll be reading through for the detail also, and appreciate the presentation. I know we'll be having lots more conversation.
Director Gallardo, do you mind if I just add a point onto Casey's presentation?
Sure, please do.
And it's just to reemphasize, and again, this was a quick turnaround, right? So we just had these stakeholder meetings, but you will see, I hope, the threads of some of these recommendations that Casey just walked through get pulled into our legislative agenda for 2022. So we got 38 million, as Casey said, and Director Clark-Kretz, we wanted 100 million over a year for 4 years. So it was fantastic. We won with 38, but as Casey said, the gap still is, by math, 362 million, right? So the advice from our legislative consultants at the state level is don't just go ask for the remainder, ask for a package that includes state policy change, that includes some streamlining, that includes the very things that Casey walked through. So that obviously a lot of that comes through the Policy and Innovation Committee. It will come back up through the board. But we're not done on the state policy change. You know that. We just had a conversation this morning about we've got the highest housing costs in the nation at this point in terms of construction, right? So we're not done on state policy. You'll see these ideas come through. They'll also come back through to Green Means Go and the local program. So as you hear more, this committee, as Casey said, is the committee that will oversee the Green Means Go program. We will be vetting and raising once again things like, parking standards. What can we help you and your staff do locally to make that development in these green zones easier? So there's a state piece, there's a local piece. So and that was why these sessions were so important, to inform us and check back in with our stakeholders, your staff, of the development community, affordable housing providers. So you will hear more about this, and they will inform both the grant program, the local policy change, and the state policy agenda for 22. So I'm just reiterating what Casey said, but I want you to understand, because they were important touch points with these stakeholders and your staff.
Thank you. I think that helps. Any other questions on James's comments? All right. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to our next item then. So next up, we have our 2024 MTP plan, and it seems, I can't believe we're saying that already still. It seems a little bit wild, but Binu Abraham is going to be our presenter.
Thank you. I think before I start my presentation, James is going to say a few words, and then I will be sharing my presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Binu. So some of you are on the SACOG Strategic Planning Committee. You know who you are. It's the former board chairs and the current leadership this year in 21 of the board. And we had a really good discussion about this idea of a triple bottom line framework that Binu is going to tell you a little bit more about, and is in your memo. And what we've done is we've put some thought into what's a possible policy framework, something that is streamlined and tight and easy. Hopefully, this is where of the many ways we want your feedback today. Something that we can communicate, that can sort of be the overarching framework for the upcoming long-range transportation plan, the MTPS, and that can really bring and highlight and elevate some of the key policy areas that the board and we as SACOG have worked on over the last couple of years. Economic prosperity has been a theme that you've heard from us for a while now. We have our prosperity strategy. We have things even like the mega region working group on some of the larger projects that knit together our larger economic mega region. On equity, we have the work of the Race, Equity, Inclusion Working Group. We want to pull equity into the next long-range plan. Very frankly, it was an appendix in the last plan, and we want to pull it forward and ask the questions around equity that Binu will get into a little bit more discussion on. And then finally, on environment, again, you know that we just talked about Green Means Go as a bottom-up, locally developed creative strategy to meet our greenhouse gas target. But I think, again, we want to not just sort of try to meet the state and federal regulations. We really want to ask ourselves, what does it look like to live in a sustainable and healthy environment for generations to come? What does it look like to have a region that is thriving and healthy, economically healthy, but also ecologically healthy? And so that triple bottom line framework actually has been around for a couple of decades. It was first kind of talked about and written about and pioneered in the 1990s, when a lot of companies were talking about the balance sheet and the bottom line of a balance sheet being around profit, but also people and planet. I was around the triple bottom line in the 2000s in the Bay Area when Sonny Wright McPeak, who then ran the Bay Area Council, used this as a framework for the sustainability plan of the greater 9-county Bay Area. And we think it nicely crystallizes a lot of the policies that the board has been working on over the last couple of years. So I'm sure there will be lots of questions. I'm sure you might be wondering, where does safety fit? Where does state of good repair fit, right? And believe me, we're not trying to be excluding of things that we will absolutely look at, like traffic safety, like fatalities and injuries. But we actually think there's a way to fit them into this framework that can actually make sense. Anyway, so that's my tee up for this. Back to you, Banu.
Thank you, James. So this is an informational item, and the intent is to have a conversation around what James just said, the triple bottom line approach as a framework for the MTPS. And within that framework, we have 3 goals, the 3 E's, equity, economy, and environment. And what I would like to do today is to expand a little bit more on what each of these 3 E's means. So as a first step, the staff has taken a stab at providing a draft statement goals for each of the E's. So I would like to go over that and then put a little bit meat on it and see what does that mean in the context of this MTP update, and how can we possibly use it to set up the policy guidelines for the plan. So give me a second while I share my screen. I think I'm having technical difficulty sharing my screen. Can somebody give me the ability to share my screen, please?
Yes, Banu, Katie's there sharing your screen. You can let her know when you need to advance.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
There we go.
All right. So this next slide, please. So I know in the world of PowerPoint, that's a lot of words that I put on that slide. So I'll give it a minute for you to just read it and absorb it. This is directly from the attachment B of the staff report. This is what the staff has a first step done as a draft policy statement for equity. So the statement is a just and inclusive region where investments are being made in historically marginalized communities. So race can no longer be used to predict health or economic outcomes, and outcomes for lower income residents are improved. So what does this translate, or how does this translate into questions for the plan? Example of a plan of a question would be, how can the MTPS help reduce racial disparity or income disparities in transportation and housing? So to look at that from that lens, let's look at a couple of examples of indicators for measuring this goal. The next slide, please. So maybe it could be by addressing an increased transportation investment in areas of high concentration of minority, or it could be improved safety in communities of concern. Next slide. Another way of looking at it is perhaps increase the transit access to essential destinations like hospitals and schools for disadvantaged communities. Or it could be providing more mobility choices. It could, if you are looking at it from a land use or a housing perspective, it could be by increasing the small lots or attached housing in high opportunity areas. So these are not baked in question. This is just questions that we are raising so that we can start thinking about what are some of the important things we need to think about. So moving on to the second E, which is the economy. A diversified regional economy built on the expansion of key economic clusters, including agriculture and food, health sciences, and innovative mobility. An inclusive economy in which all people have access to resources that give them the opportunity to realize their full potential. Again, I'll pause for a second so that you can read it on your own. Next slide, please. So a question we can ask in the economy E is how can we in MTP prioritize infrastructure investments and growth patterns that support the region's key economic clusters? Just to give you a context to this photo, because it doesn't look anything like agriculture, this is the AgStart in Woodland, which is a lab space for research and development to support our agriculture economy. And this was developed as part of the Economic Prosperity Plan by the Regional Prosperity Partnership. So this is a perfect example of how we can move the economy or using this current MTP. Next slide. What investments does the region need to make to improve our competitive standing among peer regions across the country looking to grow, attract, and retain a talented workforce? Next question. Thank you. How can we better facilitate connected communities so that business owners and residents have better access and opportunities to thrive? So these are, again, some of the questions that we would want to ask, and we would also want to ask if they are the right questions to quantify how economy can be captured in our MTP. Moving on to the last is environment. A safe and resilient region for all residents, where natural resources and air quality are sustainably managed so people can thrive here for generations. The environment factor is not a new concept for us, any of us, because the whole MTP over the last several iterations has been focused on that. But we want to broaden it to a resilient region, not just on the greenhouse gas targets. So questions could be like, how can the MTPS's transportation investments and strategic growth planning reduce carbon emissions in the region? Another question could be, how can we prioritize infrastructure investments that will help make the region more resilient in the face of climate change? For context, this photo is from the Ice House Lake, and the major concerns here are both drought and fire. So forest management and water are major issues that would need to be addressed so that and recreational opportunities so that we can have a safe environment. So how can we help reduce or mitigate the harmful tailpipe emissions and other automobile-related pollutants that negatively contribute to health, such as asthma, heart disease, and lung disease? These are examples of questions that we would endeavor to answer during the plan process. And before I open it up for discussion, I just want to mention that this is a very crucial part of the policy framework that we will be asking the board to adopt in February of 2022. So any feedback or any ideas or any comments, anything that you can provide us now, we'll be using that to shape our policy framework in the next coming couple of months. With that, I will open it up for discussions.
Thank you. I appreciate the information. James, did you want to contribute anything prior to the questions or?
No, let's roll right into it.
Okay, you got it. Thank you. I will look to the directors. Any questions on this item? I'm sure there's probably a few. Thank you. Vice Chair Kennedy.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering if in the description of the environment portion of it, there was no action. We actually didn't, as far as I could see, I'm admitted I'm out in the middle of a park at a 5K race right now. But if there's no mention of actual climate change. Now you referred to it, but it's not written in there, am I correct?
You mean like in the goal statement?
Yes.
Yes, it is not written in there.
I think we should be really upfront with that and put that in the goal statement. The words climate change, I think, would be important personally.
Noted. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Any other questions? Another hands up. We're being way too kind today. I have a feeling it's just the tip of the iceberg for a lot of questions to come and a lot of discussion to come. But thank you. I will, oh, I see Director Gore.
Well, thank you. You know, I'm looking through the questions, so I appreciate the questions that you shared with us. And I do think you've hit on some really good questions to talk about as you're looking about, you know, making sure that we're actually connecting our communities to the workplaces, right? And how do you do that so that transportation options are available for communities, low-income communities, diverse communities, really it's economic and equity, getting people to their jobs. And I think you've done a really good job on questions. Yeah, I think it's a really good start. So I just want to share that because I'm reading through them going, well, these are the questions we need to ask, and this is the work that we need to do, right? So just my like non-helpful 2 cents.
All feedback is helpful feedback. And Director Gore, if I can, just for the, and Banu has this, I think in a presentation in the memo as well, but as we were talking about with the Transportation Committee this morning, these questions are going to be, if they're not already, they will soon be the questions that our state funding partners and our federal funding partners will ask of us, right? So they will ask us these questions when we apply for transportation grants and so our job here, and I've learned this my 5 years at SACOG, of the many things this long range plan is, it is also a grant, is a document to help us write grants and make us be competitive. So if we can ask these questions now, if we can engage all of your staff, cities, counties, special districts, right? Our business partners to help develop good answers to those, it will be that much better for us when it comes time to compete, because we'll actually have informed answers.
Wonderful. All right. I don't see, oh, I do see Director Frost. Director Frost, oh, Director Frost, did you have your hand up?
I did. I'm sorry. I didn't have it off mute. I'm on my phone and I had struggling to see on this small box, but I wonder if Banu could show the slide on equity, the statement on equity. I think it was talking about economic support on equity.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Katie, can you go to the equity slide, please?
I think it was equity.
Yeah, I'm trying. My computer's very slow right now.
No worries. It's just a second slide.
Hang on. I'm gonna reshare. Can you all see it now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, the statement makes an assumption, and I wonder how we come to that assumption. It says the just and inclusive region where investments are being made in historically marginalized communities, so race can no longer be used to predict health or economic outcomes, and outcomes for lower income residents are improved. It implies that by your race, that it's in certain race communities that the economic outcomes are marginalized or less. And so is that I guess maybe it's not implying any certain race. That's what I was trying to go, that's why I wanted to go back to the slide, because in my mind, I was thinking it was implying a certain race, but I guess it's not when I look at it. Is that what you see, Benu?
Yeah, I would say that it is all race, it's not meant for any particular race, but any race that was marginalized before. We want to make sure that they are brought to the table. And I
So
would,
it's not really about race as much as it's about any community that's marginalized. Is that what that's saying?
Director Frost, let me try this. I mean, so I want to be clear. When we started the year and we went through our regional progress report, actually all the way back to the Brookings Institution report on our regional economy, there are major disparities by race, ethnicity, and by income. There are serious disparities, and most of those disparities are that communities of color do not have the same outcomes right now as non-white as white communities. So there is a racial component. There are racial disparities, absolutely. And we're not trying to say that SACOG can fix those. We would never think that we can fix everything, but we are trying to pay attention to those disparities, and we are trying to understand the tools, the levers that we have. How can we pull those, both in transportation, but also in housing, and land use and growth and development and jobs? That's the prosperity strategy. How can we narrow those disparities? So there are disparities.
You're not really referring to a specific race. You're just saying whoever the marginal communities are. Is that what that's saying? I think that's what that's saying. Whoever the marginalized communities are, they may be certain races or different races.
I think that's true. And I guess I'm just trying to understand where you're going with this, because
I think that's what I wanted to clarify, because if it was saying it was a certain race, then I would say, well, how do you know that? And, and how can you pin that down that narrowly? I don't think it is saying a certain race. It's saying it's going to whoever those marginalized communities are. That's the effort is to help the marginalized communities.
True. And I guess I'm just trying to not bury the lead, which is a lot of marginalized communities also happen to be communities of color. That's just back to the data that is in that regional progress report in terms of disparities that exist today in our region.
Which color?
Sorry?
Which color?
You mean by race, ethnicity?
You said it's communities of color. I think that's what I'm leading to. I mean, I don't think you can pin it down to any one color.
Huge disparities in African-American communities, big disparities in Latino communities. It really varies by the indicator you're looking at, right? There are major disparities, and it varies. It varies by where we are in our region, but it is largely people of color, Black communities, Latino. So that is one of the reasons that for the first time we cut a lot of our outcomes and our data in our progress report in January by race, ethnicity, and income.
I think we're saying the same thing.
Okay.
I think that's what I wanted to go back and look at it, because I couldn't see it very well, and so I think I'm clear on what it says. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on. Director Kennedy.
Thank you, Chair. On that particular slide, the equity, and by the way, James, I appreciate everything you said and agree with you. Maybe even add something in there, race and/or zip code, because we know that a person's zip code is a huge determinant to access to healthcare, access to healthy foods, access to education, all of that. So, I mean, unfortunately, zip code is one of the leading determinants of someone's quality of life. So I don't know, maybe something of that added in there.
Thank you. Director Gore.
Thank you. I appreciate Director Kennedy's point, and I agree that zip codes actually do. They indicate, people's health outcomes, economic outcomes. But as we're looking at transportation, I think that I would feel more comfortable just focusing on the way the wording is here and not just focusing on zip codes, but focusing on the marginalized communities where they haven't had the same investment. I think that that's a more broader look at it. So I would prefer not drilling down.
And Director Gore, could you say that part? The last line, I'm sorry, I didn't catch it. So you said, I prefer
not to drill down into zip code. I think the way it's written now, it works for me.
Great, thank you. Any other comments on this item or those suggestions? Okay, seeing none, then I am going to James, did you have anything for follow-up on this item?
Let me see if Banu has any wrap up.
I would just say that any feedback that we appreciate all the feedback we received, and we will put that into account, take that into account while we are shaping the policy framework. Again, to reiterate, we will be coming to you for adoption of the policy framework in February of 2022. That's 2 months from now. And this is really excellent conversation that will help the staff shape that, how that goal should be there written, and what kind of indicators and what kind of metrics we should look into to figuring out or answering the questions that we have. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And I also should check, was there any public comment on this item?
No public comment.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for that presentation. I know we'll have lots more conversation and hopefully have the input you needed. We're going to move on to the next item, which is our regional growth projections, and Garrett Ballard-Rosso will be presenting.
Yep, thanks, Chair. Good afternoon, members of the committee. And so Banu just talked about one of the first actions you'll be taking as this committee and the board on your upcoming 2024 long-range plan, which is the framework, the goals and the objectives, and how we measure the investments in the plan in the EEE framework. And then my presentation is talking about sort of the next action you'll be taking, which is sort of translating these policy ideas into a very technical element of the plan. It's one of the very first building blocks that get us to 2024, as the chair alluded to up front. That seems like such a long ways away, but we're already working hard, and it's a step-by-step process. And so we need to be taking these incremental steps to get to an adoption by that time. And so what I'm talking about today is called the regional growth projections. And really it is our best estimate of where we anticipate our SACOG region being at long into the future, 20 or even 30 years out, in terms of our population, our jobs, and our households. And we very much recognize that a projection that long out is very full of uncertainty, and it's very dependent on the assumptions we make. And as I was talking to the Transportation Committee this morning, it's hard enough to do these projections in quote unquote a normal time. And then of course we have the disruptions like we've all felt the last 18 months because of the COVID pandemic, right? Turns a lot of our assumptions on their head. So we want to be upfront about the assumptions we're making in this exercise, but we also have great guidance in that these are long-term projections. We try to tease out what are some short-term impacts and maybe what are the longer-term things that really will shape the trajectory of our region. And we start at sort of the historical look. James alluded to the progress report that we released in January, which is a look at how the region's been doing across a variety of indicators, including those economic indicators that illustrate disparity by race and ethnicity. And then we also use a lot of great resources such as the Census Bureau and its state counterpart called DOF, and our own panel of experts. I mean, thinking about where the region is going to be moving forward. So it's not just simply, here's the trend the last 10 years or 20 years, let's just carry it forward. It's using that trend as a context, but then thinking critically about where we'll be moving forward. Wanted to talk about some of the things we've been seeing and focusing on sort of maybe those longer term trends. I know that the headlines are very much focused on the last 18 months and what's been happening because of COVID, and we'll have plenty to say about that. But I wanted to start with this presentation talking about sort of those longer term trends and maybe contextualize it, because maybe these are some things that maybe aren't as up in front and center of mind as much as we are, because we're reading all the articles and talking to all the experts. And the first thing I wanted to be talking about is population. So again, that's one of the things we're going to be looking at, where the region will be 20 or 30 years from now in terms of population. I should say that this project is looking at the macro, or the whole SACOG region, all 6 counties. And then we work very closely with our land use team and your own jurisdictions about how that growth is distributed across communities within the region. And the point about population is that the US is, we situate these projections, what's going on in our region, within the state, within the nation, and within the globe. And population, not just in the US, but actually internationally, has actually been slowing. And I think that's probably an underreported finding. And so the recent census data that just came out for the 2010 to 2020 period within this country actually had a slower growth rate. And again, we're talking about percentages. We can also talk about absolute numbers, but it's a slower growth rate, actually one of the slowest growth rates in recorded history in this country, align more of what we saw in the Great Recession and some times in the 1800s. So it's a very much related to the demographics, and we can go into if there's questions. But put simply, people are having fewer and fewer kids, so it's sort of hard to grow a population with fewer kids who then age and have their own families and so on and so forth. And so the point I'm trying to make is, as we start getting into 2035, 2040, 2045, 2050, a lot of these demographic trends sort of come to a head. And I mentioned the great resources we can look to, such as the Census Bureau. When they do their own set of projections into the future, what the country might look like that long into the future, they see a much slower growth rate. And of course, our own SACOG region, that's not the end all be all. There's a lot of things that we look at about how we are unique and how we compete against other regions, but that is a major factor about how we situate within the sort of the larger growth rate within the nation. So that's sort of a key one, is growth is slowing. It's not a doom and gloom scenario, but it is slowing. And the US, this is on a national perspective, it's just still a robust growth rate. We've tended to see in our own region a case to see that we're growing faster than the state and the nation. But again, if growth is slowing everywhere, that'll also affect what's happening here. So that's one of the first elements, again, is population. The second is jobs, and this of course relates heavily to the E, one of the E's, actually all of the E's, economy and equity first and foremost, but there's an environmental side of it too, of what Banu just talked about in the triple bottom line framework, and where we see the region going in terms of jobs. And again, the historical record is an important element of this. It's not the only one. In our prosperity strategy that James alluded to, our work with GSEC and the Chamber and Valley Vision and others, we talk about those tradable sector jobs. And you saw in Banu's presentation as well, those 3 sectors that we highlight: food, ag, life sciences, and innovative mobility, as areas we think the region is poised to compete moving forward. But the record to date has been most of the job growth in the region has not been in tradable sectors, has been in population serving sectors. So again, another input that's used into the projections. And then finally, households. We've had a good conversation with your colleagues this morning in the Transportation Committee about, of course, all 3 of these are related: population, households, and jobs. But one of the main things is, as we've been articulating through prior plans, our region, like other regions in the state, has been underproducing housing. And then if you overlay that with the affordability of housing in the state and elsewhere, there's been some key delays in new households starting. So new families forming and making their own households. And in particular, that's in the sort of millennial generational cohort, which is now the largest generational cohort in the United States. So again, that has some ripple effects moving forward. All to say, there are these sort of larger contextualizing influences that are affecting our region that all point to some sort of indicators of slower growth. I think we should really emphasize that's not the end all be all. We have our expert panel tomorrow to build on this conversation we had with them earlier, talking about our own region and how we compete economically, to really sort of be aware of those demographic trends, but also sort of think through our own sort of economic trajectory and how they interface. But we wanted to bring at least that framing to you now, in that we will be coming back to you and your colleagues on the committees next month in December with an actual draft projection that gets at least 20 or 25 years into the future. So at least you have that framing, and again, give you the time to digest, ask questions or comments. And as Banu mentioned, you'll be taking an action in February on the framework. We'd also ask for your action in February on the growth projections, which then becomes a key technical input to the rest of the plan. The final point I'll sort of make is, as I mentioned up front, right? We want to be clear that the future is uncertain. That yes, it's we're doing our best estimate based on a lot of great data and a lot of expert opinions, but assumptions in these things do matter. But also that as I mentioned, we've tended to see a very competitive position for our SACOG region in growing faster than the state and the nation. That needs justification for our sort of oversight partners. How do you sort of demonstrate that, yes, you are going to be growing faster than the state and the nation? And to do that, we look for those policies that Banu just mentioned on the EEE, in that you as the board, when we come forward with you with a growth projection, need to weigh in and say, do you find this reasonable given the policies and the reasoning behind it, and that it's not safe to assume that any sort of growth will happen just because it will fall into our lap. As I mentioned to your colleagues this morning, one of the key points from some of our expert panelists a couple of weeks ago is, as these demographic trends come to a head, there'll be more and more competition for a skilled labor force, not just within regions in California, but regions across the country and regions across the globe. So how do we distinguish ourselves here in Sacramento region? We think there's a lot of great things we can point to, but our ultimate projection is predicated on the ability to demonstrate that we can move the needle. So again, a lot of sort of background material to throw at you. The key points will be coming back to you in December with the actual growth projection for draft discussion purposes, coming back in February for the action. And we wanted to kind of give this framing because it will be important to that conversation in December, and happy to talk through any questions you may have.
Thank you, Garrett. I'm really looking forward to that detail of questions. I know or information. I do have one question just as an overlook, do you see any areas in our region that did not have growth recently?
A great question. So what we do is, in this part of it, is we take a step back and we look at the economy as a whole and the region as a whole, but we work very closely with our colleagues and your own jurisdiction staff. And so when we present to you in December a number, it will be an average growth rate. That doesn't mean to preclude. In fact, it will be, certain parts of the region will be above that and below that. And so we still have areas that, varies pretty significantly from that average. Some areas are faster growing and some areas are slower growing. So you know this well. Director Gallardo of the city of Rockland, right, has been a fast growing community, especially on a percentage basis, and that it's a smaller community relative to an LA or a Fresno or something. So a 10 or 20 or 30,000 new residents really moves the needle in terms of percentages. And so there are communities for sure that will, that's an average. Some will grow faster and some will grow slower, but this is meant to sort of give the cadence or the flavor of the growth, and not to preclude the fact that yes, some markets will outperform and some markets will underperform.
Thank you. Any other questions for Garrett from the committee? All right, well, I'm not seeing any hands, but I know that we're going to be diving into the meat when you give us those details. So I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on then. And and I apologize. Was there any public comment on this item?
No public comment.
Thank you, Lynette. All right, well, seeing that, we will move on to committee reports, and I'll just be looking to the team and say, does anyone have anything that they would love to share that any information? Something that we should all know. Hey, I think we're all just so darn busy getting our communities back open and all that we've been going through that it makes it, there's probably more than you could even release, but I can tell you in Rockland, we had our State of the City last week, and I'm really looking forward to Monday hosting our city county dinner. I don't know if everyone does that, but we get all of our leadership from our county and city leaders together, and it'll be the first time in a while. So we're looking forward to getting everyone together and sharing what everybody's been doing and how we're all getting through this, and our successes and triumphs and our not so successful items. So we're looking forward to seeing everyone to get together again. All right. Oh, I see Director New.
I just want to let you know that again this year on December 4th, we're going to have a tractor parade, and I want everybody to come to Winters, have dinner, look around, enjoy the tractor parade. It's become bigger and better every year. And I think that if you talk to anybody who's seen it, it's worth your time. And certainly the food here is excellent. So come eat, drink, be merry, watch the tractor parade.
I love it. Is that as a daytime or evening tractor?
Evening.
Is this a light up tractor parade? Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. That sounds really fun.
Sure thing. Thanks.
Director Baines.
Unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Just again, we have here in Yuba City in Sutter County, the 42nd annual Nugget Ethan, which is a Sikh parade that'll be held this Sunday, the 7th of November. Tomorrow it starts off with a fireworks show in the evening. Saturday is open house, and there's open bazaar and the free food. All attendees, all you can eat, come out and did just. It's open house. I mean, I just want to open invitation for folks that have not come to the community or been to a Sikh temple before. People very hospitable, kind, and like mind, good neighbors. But want to give an open invitation to everybody for this weekend. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I look forward to taking you up on that. I know I am out here in Indiana cheering on the Irish this weekend, and I know you all are too, clearly. But if next time I have an opportunity, I will take you up on that. Thank you.
No, most definitely. It's last year we were not able to have it because due to COVID. And so this year they put their, some the restrictions and that type of stuff in place. But we hope everybody is safe and we're trying to accommodate those. But look forward to hopefully some good weather on Sunday and a lot of folks participating. So once again, you all are welcome.
Thank you so much. All right, if that is it for the good of the order, I think we have a receive and file. Dob, anything that you wanted to share with us on the blueprint implementation? I think that must mean no.
I don't think Dob is on the line, but I will say, please, I tell my staff, I actually read the blueprint implementation stuff every month because, and Chair Gallardo, I know you've got a couple of the housing projects in your city as well. Remember that we're one of the most active agencies on land use and growth and development. We have a blueprint that you all put together back in 2004, and we are ready and willing to write letters to come to your councils and your board of supervisors. If your development projects are consistent, we will weigh in, obviously connecting with you first, but we will weigh in because both the blueprint, the growth patterns, the sustainable community strategy that we're trying to implement is critical to the future of the region. And there's not a lot of COGs and MPOs that do this, but we do. So it's receive and file every month, but I do want to flag for all of you, those are sometimes very, very important voices and perspectives and letters and even public testimony that we can provide. So
wonderful. Well, thank you all so very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. I'm glad we hopefully got through quickly. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'll see you at our next meeting, December 2nd, for our last meeting of this calendar year. And thank you all. Good afternoon and go Irish.
Take care.